Baroness Helic, welcome to Lord Speaker's podcast. Now, you have not had a smooth, conventional route into politics. Now you've mixed with quite a number of people who've had that conventional route, but you stand out as it being unconventional. You know, you were born in 1968 in Gračnica, northeast Bosnia, raised communist.
More or less.
More or less. Now in the Conservative Party, raised by Bosnian Muslims. So tell us about your background, your home life and your journey.
Wow, well, thank you so much for having me first. And it's great to be here and to talk to you. And I would agree with you, there is a conventional and less conventional way of becoming a member in the House of Lords. And I must say, every single member has their own story, even those who have had what you would consider to be a conventional way. And mine is a little bit different because I was, as you said, I was born in what used to be a Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, a country that no longer exists, ceased to exist in the 1990s. And I was born in one of its republics, Bosnia and Herzegovina. And as you rightly point out, my dad was in Yugoslav National Army. He was a civil servant later on. And it was a communist, socialist communist society. It wasn't communism of a kind that you probably would associate with the Soviet Union or China. It was a different kind of communism. It wasn't as strict as imposed like the one in the Baltic states or Romania, Czechoslovakia, or any of the other Soviet states. It was something, I would say, in between socialism and communism. Regardless, it was a different society to the one that I live in now. And it was unusual. I look at it these days and I wonder whether there were some positives living in that society, you know, having a free education, free healthcare, free university education, but also learning about respect and environment. And I remember,
was the family important in that society?
Family was very important, but also was the belonging and contribution that one could make to society. Because age 6, when you went to primary school, you would become a pioneer, and age 14, you would become a member of the Youth Communist Party, and then when you would go to university, etc., you would grow within the system. Family was important, extremely important, and I'm lucky that my parents were encouraging when it comes to education, encouraging when it comes to not so much success, but fulfillment and contentment.
And you had 4 sisters, 5?
I have 4 sisters, I'm the 5th.
Have prospered educationally?
Yes. My dad used to say something really funny because there are 5 daughters, and he would say, he's often asked by his colleague, does every one of your daughters have to go to university? And he would say, if I had 5 sons, they would have a choice. There are 5 daughters, they have to do it. Because women have to be economically independent, then they can be independent in every other way. So I'm really grateful for everything that I was taught from by my dad and my mum. And my sisters, I must say, they're way much more impressive than I am. But I'm doing my best to say,
you could call them a commoner, you know, or is it?
Yeah, exactly.
So you've got a little bit on them.
They do tease me sometimes when I go to Bosnia. I go every summer. They say, "Oh, the Baroness is coming. We've got to really be ready." And I'm a very relaxed Baroness, and I really think about my place in this house as a huge privilege and a place not only where I can contribute, but where I can learn.
And as the family, have they stayed in Bosnia?
Yes, I have one sister who is in United Kingdom, and the rest of my family is in Bosnia. So I'm kind of caught in between 2, but I am fully fully committed and dedicated, and I live in Britain.
Yeah. And you went to University of Sarajevo and studied English literature.
That's correct.
And
I studied English literature and English language, and my whole plan was that one day I was going to be Shakespeare scholar, because that is one thing I wanted to do. I was fascinated by English literature, I was fascinated by the language, I was fascinated by history, and it just didn't work out because the war interfered, and it almost felt like I was being negligent and I was being too relaxed if I was going to dedicate my time to art and, if you want, literature, rather than try to kind of activate myself as someone who could explain to friends and colleagues what exactly was going on in former Yugoslavia in the 1990s. And I chose to go to London School of Economics and study history of international relations. And then from there I went to King's and I started a PhD, which I haven't finished, to my shame, because I got seduced by politics. And I joined the Conservative Party in 1997, entirely inspired, I must say, by a very strong stance that Margaret Thatcher took in 1992 on the wars in Yugoslavia. She wasn't confused, she saw it with clarity, she saw where the aggression was coming from, and she was very clear about it, while others were prevaricating, while others were trying to...
Was the Foreign Office not prevaricating a bit?
It was.
Because I remember Douglas Hurd as Foreign Secretary, and he was being heavily criticised in the House of Commons at that particular time about inaction. Yeah,
Brendan Sims, he's an author and he teaches at Cambridge, he described those years as the unfinest hour. And I would agree, that was the unfinest hour. The 1990s were, and I remember very clearly as a young student, I would come and listen to the debates. I would sit in a public gallery in the Commons, and I just could not understand that people couldn't see what was going on, that they were not open to listen to it. And it wasn't until, I must say, until 1997 when Tony Blair's government came in, that there was a change and there was a sudden reassessment of everything that was done. And that came after the genocide in Srebrenica in 1995, which is incidentally this year is the 30th anniversary. And it was difficult. And among those, if you want, not so fine voices that were coming from the then government of John Major, there was a former Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher, who with absolute clarity and inspiration to me spoke about the dangers of neglecting what was turning to be a slaughterhouse in Bosnia in the 1990s. And that inspired me not only to join the Conservative Party, but also to go to London School of Economics, study history of international relations, understand how this society thinks, and try to use what I've learned to explain not only what was going on there, but later on in my career, if you want, when I was at Foreign Office, etc., I tried to speak to truth to power, and I try to carry some of that personal experience.
Sometimes you could end up kicked out of the door for speaking truth to power.
I know, but it is necessary. It is like it is like if you sometimes you take a medicine that doesn't really suit you, but it helps you through. We can either manage decline, or we can try and speak up and say this is wrong, not because we have particular allegiances, but because on some not on human level, we have to have inner moral radar, where when things are not easy to talk about, when things are hard to talk about because they are not either accepted as a if you want as a common and acceptable, you got to speak, because there will be times when we will all look back and say, where were we at that time and in that moment, etc. And so sort of Douglas Hurd's, he wrote, I think in late 90s, early 2000s, he wrote a book and he reflected on what was happening in former Yugoslavia, and I think he could find himself that there were things that should have and could have been done differently, and some lives could have been saved.
Yeah, but there was an institutional resistance. It just wasn't Douglas hard to...
Absolutely, absolutely. There was an institutional, and I think that people kind of learned from that experience. When I went to Foreign for the first time, I wasn't quite sure what I was going to find, how I was going to...
Give us a little bit of a story in there, because you actually were in the House of Commons for a while before
Yes,
that.
I did.
So tell us where you were.
Well, I was at London School of Economics, and there was an opportunity to come to the House of Commons library for a bit of a work experience. And I had a week, and that week extended to another week, and another week, and another week, and sort of a year later, I was still there. But I had a fantastic opportunity to go through every single department, if you want, a section of the library. So I did Home Affairs and Foreign Policy, and I did Defence, and I did Environment, and I was even in a I cannot remember what it was called. It was a place where you receive books and they get catalogued. And I remember I was a person who would catalogue these books and helping the librarian with it. And then at the time, that was way before we started using sort of IT in a very effective way. You would do newspaper cuttings. Mm-hmm. So in the mornings, I would do newspaper cuttings and sort of like arrange them all. And then I completely by chance run into the late Robert Key MP for Salisbury. And I did a piece...
His father was the Bishop of Salisbury, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Mm-hmm. And I did a piece of work for him, and he said to me, if you ever want to do some research work, do come and help in my office. And that's what I did. And I joined him and his kind of shadow defense team. And I started with the shadow defense team, yes. It was in the 1990s, late 1990s.
Right. So take us on from there. What did you go there? You eventually teamed up with William Hague, but there's a little bit of a journey before that.
Oh, there is quite a bit of that. Well, I was... just before, 2 years before 9/11, I got a job in a venture capital company. I left House of Commons, where I worked with different members who were doing defence, Ian Duncan Smith and Bernard Jenkin, and as I say, late Robert Key, late John Maples, if you remember. He was on the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. And I went to work for a venture capital company for 2 years, which was a totally different world. It was well paid, but really not very satisfactory. I didn't find it, I wasn't passionate enough about it. So I kind of never thought I would stay there forever. And then a terrorist attack took place in America, 9/11. And I remember having this desire to go back and help out. And I don't know why I thought that I was going to change anything, but I went back and started working on a shadow defense and foreign policy team, and I worked for Bernard Jenkin and again another colleague we've lost who was the shadow Foreign Secretary Michael Ancram.
Michael, yes, died a number of months back.
And then from then on, at some point, and Nicholas Soames was also Shadow Defence Secretary. At some point, William Hague was appointed Shadow Foreign Secretary, and I applied for a job. I applied more to see whether I could kind of crack it. Mm-hmm. I never thought that of all the candidates that he interviewed, that I would be the one that he would want to be his researcher and special advisor. And after a few interviews, I was offered a job, and a big adventure started.
Well, why do you think he chose you? You know, given your background and the experience you had in the Western Balkans, whatever, he was Shadow Foreign Secretary. Mm. It seems a good match.
I think he chose me because now I know him. I have a really high, or Lord Hague, I have a really high opinion of him. He's a very good friend. I worked for him for 11 years. I got to know him. I think he is one of those rare people who loves challenge. He's very good at putting teams together, and I guess I was an unusual team member. I wasn't someone who was very similar to him. I was someone who was so dissimilar, both to him and other colleagues that were on the team, that I fitted in quite well. And I think I was always the person that would question everything. And he is extremely good at that, allowing you space to disagree. Mm-hmm. And once you agree what the strategy is and what the goal is, everyone is lined up behind that. And that suited me as well. And I felt so free to be who I really am, because I really didn't expect to get this job. I wasn't competing to get it. I just wanted to have the experience, because by that time he wrote his book, William Wilberforce. Mm-hmm. I listened to him. His exchanges as a leader of opposition with Prime Minister Blair were legendary.
They say he won every time in the floor of the House, but didn't win the election.
I know, but you can't have it all. But he's just so smart, and I just thought, like, this is someone I would absolutely love to work for. But I really didn't expect to get a job.
I suppose that's a good example of leadership, where the individual is not in front pulling people along, but is walking alongside people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And he showed that, for example, when he was in Foreign Office, we all lined up behind him, and there was a beautiful energy inside the Foreign Office, I would say. And I'm sure many of my colleagues who are still in Foreign Office would agree that we all wanted to succeed, and we all wanted what we were doing to really come to fruition and really do the best that we could. And that is hugely inspiring.
Yeah, and you're credited with changing the way of thinking, the narrative regarding war, on the impact on nation states to the impact on people. And I can see that in your contributions on the floor of the House here, that any speech that you've made that's people-centred.
It is, I think, and thank you for that, but I think it is because of my personal experience, war and conflict is not something that is not familiar to me. It is not an essay title. It is not a theoretical exercise. It's very real. It is, I know, and I'm glad that you have noticed that every single conflict never ends the moment the peace agreement is signed or the guns fall silent. That conflict continues and stays with people way beyond the generation that went through the war, or their children or their grandchildren. It is just transgenerational trauma, and we do not appreciate just how hurtful that is, that how much damage it creates and causes in a society. And I always try to think, if I can just bring a little bit of that, I wouldn't even call it soft, I was like a human experience of war, that I might stop people to think why and how important it is that we always act in a preemptive way. Doesn't matter how long the diplomatic kind of path is, stay on it as long as you can, because wars are so damaging. And then you don't switch them on and off. Conflicts don't go from 0 to 10 and back to 0. They go from 0 to 5 to 10, and then they linger around that 5 forever and ever and ever. And some societies go way beyond 0 because they find themselves completely upended, and the people who live within those societies, particularly children, they grow up not having a good start, and we often talk about, I was thinking about this the other day, conversations around COVID and how much we have had in terms of research and discussions and debates and conversations about what effect it has had on children. Now imagine the effect that war and bombs and disaster and seeing your parents and your grandparents get killed, seeing bodies being torn to pieces. Imagine what that does to a young individual. What kind of start do they have? And that is, I often think about whatever conflict, whether that's Ukraine or any other conflict today, I often want to kind of try and think about them. That is, the center of it is not the economy, it's not a big power rivalry. The center of it is a human being, and that is where our starting point needs to be, and that is what we need to insist on.
Angelina Jolie in the film Land of Blood and Honey,
Yes.
2011, explored rape as a weapon of war, and that fitted in with your philosophy, and you've linked up with Angelina, and I have to say it seemed a sort of odd couple, Angelina Jolie and William Hague. But
opposites attract. I think the odd couple you can say, but really effective couple as well, and as a working kind of team. Yes, she's. I remember very clearly. I was in Foreign Office. I actually was, prior to that, I was aware of reports of sexual violence and rape committed against women in Bosnia. But somehow I reacted to that the way everyone else reacts, which is you think about people who need immediate help and support. Those are refugees, you need to clear landmines, they're wounded, they are traumatized, they're they're children who are without parents, etc. So it kind of like, to me, it was like it was a crime, it was talked about, it was a bit of a stigma around it.
You've called it an invisible crime.
It is an invisible crime because it's, and I'll explain that. And I was aware of it, but I kind of never thought about it in a very, it wasn't sort of vivid to me. I couldn't. And even though I heard reports of some of my friends from school being detained in these, what they become to be known as rape camps, but I kind of didn't think about it. And then I read about her doing this film, and I remember being really angry. I was like, how can a woman who lives in Los Angeles do a film about what is considered to be most complicated, which I don't agree with now, but they're regions, and about one of the most sensitive issues that can affect a society. So I kind of followed that, and then the film was finished and it was shown, and I was like, maybe I should just, before I start criticizing anything, maybe I should see it. And I managed to get a copy of the film. I watched it, and it was so well done. It was so real. It reminded me of my home, of my friends, and it brought to me their experiences. And obviously, I will never be able to understand it, what it is like, or what it was like. But if there was 20% of that I understood, that inspired me to take that film, put it in front of William Hague and say, could you please watch this? And I got another copy and I gave it to Ed Llewellyn, Lord Llewellyn now, who shared it with the Prime Minister. And I said to William, I watched it, it's really hard to watch, but please can you do it? And we were on a flight he was going to Australia for CHOGM. And I gave it to him on a computer and I was like, gotta watch it. And he would watch and stop and watch and stop. And he said, what are we going to do about it? And I said, why don't we invite her to show the film in Foreign Office, and then we will see what happens then. And to her credit, I managed to get hold of her through the embassy here, etc. She said she would come, but she wanted something concrete to come out of it. And we sat down after the film was shown and we came up with the idea of setting up Preventing Sexual Violence in Conflict initiative, which I'm really pleased to say has survived. Yep. Different governments and different prime ministers and foreign ministers and foreign secretaries, and we have in the Lord Collins new special envoy, and I'm really, really proud, not because I am associated with it, is that we've always had bipartisan kind of like support when it comes to this issue. I worked very closely with a shadow Labour team, and I'm really pleased that the Prime Minister has appointed Lord Collins as a new special envoy, who he took over from Lord Ahmed. And
he did a splendid job.
He did a splendid job, and I was actually going to speak to Lord Collins about this yesterday, but we had a statement in the House, so we had to postpone it. And it is, and I say it is extraordinary because it is one of those crimes that is, survivors of this crime are stigmatized, perpetrators are not, and that's something that we need to flip. But what happens is that there is so much shame surrounding it that in the war and circumstances where there is no peace and there is no support, and if you look at Sudan today, for example, women are only happy to have survived so they can look after their children. They're the providers. Very few of them will come forward and identify themselves as victims of sexual violence, which doesn't mean that they have not been massively violated, that trauma is not going to stay with them, because it stays with them, it stays with their family, it stays with the community. That's what it is all about, because it's a cheap weapon of traumatizing, a cheap weapon of defeating your enemy, and if it's done on the basis of religion or ethnicity, it's a weapon that is actually part of ethnic cleansing and genocide. And women often, and boys and men as well, who survive this ordeal and this crime don't want to talk about it. Mm-hmm. And I think we need to help them in the best way that we can, because as I say, it stays with their community and their families, and in a way it perpetuates conflict, because if you cannot address this harm, and if you cannot make sure that there is some justice done, this is going to come back and haunt not only them, but those on whose behalf this was committed.
Yeah, obviously the state of the world today and the turbulence and the disruption, rape is still a big issue, but how much progress has been made on this?
We are living in the era where we have never had as many conflicts as we have today. We are living in the era where international institutions have never been weaker, where support for countries that are in need of support is dwindling, and where this tool is used as a cheap tool of terrorizing civilians, women and girls in particular, boys and men as well. The examples of what is happening, for example, in Sudan is a very good one. The example of what's happening in DRC is another good one. I was talking to Dr. Denis Mukwege. He is a Nobel Peace Prize winner. He is a gynecologist who has worked with victims and survivors of sexual violence in the Congo. And he told me recently that only in the first quarter of this year, they had 40,000 victims or survivors of sexual violence. Half of them were children, and some as young as 2 months. And you would expect that, like 10 years ago, that would have made a front page of every single newspaper. That would have caused countries like ours to initiate a UN Security Council debate, emergency session, deployment, etc. None of that happened, because we are in the midst of the biggest upheaval, I think, in the world.
We've become globally desensitized.
We have become globally desensitized because we have so many other things that are happening. But not only that, I think that we have really lost part of our humanity when it comes to responding to disasters and crimes like this. And I think part of that is also that we live in an era, and this is something that really we need to explore, that we live in an era where we are fully aware of. It's not something that we find out about later on because a historian or report has been written. We watch and are aware about everything in real time. And I often get puzzled at what is it that is stopping us from reacting. Maybe there are too many of these issues, or maybe we have been desensitized, or maybe we have just come to the conclusion that there's absolutely nothing we can do about anything because everything is proliferating in a way that it is. But that is something that we need to address. And I think that have we succeeded? I would say we succeeded in making sure that people can openly talk about it, that countries are putting resources and effort behind it. Is it enough? No, it isn't. Is it prevalent? Yes, it is. Is it more prevalent than it used to be? I would say there are more conflicts, but we are also more open about it. Rape as a weapon of war was used after the Second World War, particularly in Berlin. It wasn't talked about until 1970s and 1980s.
Yeah, I'm listening to a podcast on the blockade of Berlin, and the issue of rape of German women has come up quite a bit, particularly by Russian soldiers at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, there is. I worked and helped with an exhibition that has just opened in Imperial War Museum on rape as a weapon of war, and you can see just over the last century, half of the last century, that it has been a persistent feature of every single conflict. It is just that it wasn't talked about, and I think if there is one, if I can call it success, or one contribution that Preventing Sexual Violence in Conflict Initiative has made, it is that it has opened this taboo and people talk about it. And I remember after the film that Angelina made in Bosnia, women who never spoke, and even men, came forward and they said, this is what happened to me. And the cases have been addressed, and those who perpetrated these crimes have been were apprehended and were taken to face the courts of law. So you know, this is something that we can't just say it is impossible to address. We have to talk about it. We have to do our best to address it, and we have to, as I say, flip that impunity and stigma. Stigma has to be on a perpetrator, not on a victim or survivor. And until we get to that point, I think there's a lot of work that we need to do.
Yep. In terms of your own country in the Western Balkans, is it on the brink of war now?
I wouldn't say that it is on the brink of war. I would say that in Western Balkans is potentially a second front that Russia might want to open, not so much because it has got territorial pretensions like it might have when it comes to the Baltics or to Ukraine or parts of Georgia or Moldova, but that it sees it as a good terrain where it has few proxies that can cause us quite a substantial headache and destruction, and that it comes at a very low price because they don't have to do anything. They just have to feed nationalist and agenda. And I hope, and I have tried to impress it.
So that's within your area you're talking about?
Yes, and Bosnia in particular, because Bosnia war ended there with the Dayton Peace Accords. It is the most complicated constitution that you can think of. You know, you have two entities and you have cantons, and every canton has a prime minister. Every entity has a prime minister and a president. I mean, it is like a nightmare. It's probably, I was reading somewhere, when it comes to the cost of bureaucracy to run the country, is higher than running the United States in proportion to the size and the GDP, etc. And it is unworkable. It needs to be updated, and it needs to be brought to the 21st century so Bosnia can actually progress on its Euroatlantic path. Can Bosnia do it on her own? I don't think so. Should we try and help it? I think so, because I think the Balkans overall today, when you're talking about Kosovo, Serbia, Montenegro, Bosnia, Northern Macedonia, is in the place where maybe Ukraine was in 2014, i.e. we can do something about it. It won't be expensive, but we have to have a political will, and we have to have a vision for it. And if we have that, we can make progress and avert a potential destabilization and a conflict. Are we going to have it? I don't know. I mean, we are sort of, you know, there are three parties now. You have European Union, United Kingdom, United States. We should all be speaking from the same plan, and we should all be working towards never repeating a mistake that we made when it comes to Ukraine.
But you're working and encouraging the closer relationship between the Western Balkans and Europe, the European Union?
Oh, absolutely. I don't think that at the moment, European Union and NATO are like a big donut with a big hole in the middle, and that's Western Balkans. And Western Balkans is a part of Europe. It belongs to Europe. It is a natural home, is part of that union. And I would absolutely love to see Western Balkans, every single country being part of EU and NATO, because in particular when it comes to Bosnia and Kosovo and Serbia, etc., all those if you want, smaller inter-ethnic issues will be best resolved if the issue of borders is not alive. And it will not be alive for as long as everyone feels that they're part of something bigger.
I suppose that was the success of the Northern Ireland peace process, what they call the Good Friday Agreement, where the border was relegated, and Northern Ireland citizens could declare themselves citizens of the United Kingdom, but also of the Republic of Ireland.
Absolutely.
And therefore the border didn't matter
Absolutely.
in that way. And it was the European Union, I think, that engaged and facilitated that into an international agreement.
Absolutely. I'm a huge believer. Everyone says, for example, Bosnia is a complicated country. I said, no, Bosnia is not a complicated country. Every single Bosnian citizen, no matter where they come from, they want what you and I want. They want to wake up in the morning, go to work. If they're sick, want to go have a good health care, want their children to go to schools and then get jobs and prosper. That is what they want. But if their leaders, those who have nationalist or other interests, if they keep on holding them hostages to borders, either I am going to change borders or I'm not going to allow the borders to be changed, you are constantly taking away responsibility from the leaders. Where they need to deliver, they actually use these borders to kind of like constantly keep their people in check. And I think that is why it's important that the issue of borders is addressed, either through European Union, and until that time through guarantee that borders in the Western Balkans remain unchanged.
Okay, I'm going to follow your logic here and ask you a cheeky question. Do you regret the UK not being in the EU now?
It's not a cheeky question, it's a very good question. Yes, I do actually. I do. I cannot understand that we are better off being outside the biggest trading bloc, a continent that is that we have so much in common, a continent we share history. Not only, I mean, every time, you know, like you have 80 years of this and 100 years of that, etc., and people have died to defend the continent and defend the future of peace and stability in Europe. And for us to step out, I just can't, I don't understand that. And in particular, I don't understand that people think that somehow it is better for a young British person not to have access and experience and learn from our European friends, allies, neighbors, but kind of be inward looking and be here. And when I was reading the other day about President Trump cancelling all the visas, including for the UK citizens, I was thinking like, so you can't go to European Union, you can't go to America, probably it's too far to go to Australia. And it's not like everyone goes abroad, but if everyone can have an experience of 6 months or a year in France or Germany or Netherlands or Belgium or any country, that enriches a person. So I think I remain convinced that we made a mistake because we have decided that we are kind of in the big turbulent world, somehow we are better on our own than together with those who we share so much and have so much in common with. And
a few months back, you applied for a private notice question to me as Lord Speaker, which I granted, on the humanitarian situation in Gaza. Now, what was your purpose there in that? It was a very good debate, you introduced it very well, and you focused just on the humanitarian element. But how does the Middle East connect with Ukraine? How does it connect with Sudan? How does it connect with the Western Balkans? Is it a seamless engagement?
It is it's a difficult one to debate, I think. And I'm sure you have noticed, and we had a question yesterday, it was difficult to even get a slot to ask a supplementary, because it's such a divisive issue, and my starting point is that it shouldn't be. While we all recognize and there is no doubt that what happened on October 7th was a terror attack, that it would have had a deep and devastating effect on any country. Yeah. And I think Israel in particular, because I can imagine, as someone who comes from a country that was torn by war, that there will be an element of hypervigilance where no matter what we think or anyone else thinks, this is my personal experience, this is how I feel it, I've been attacked. I completely respect that there was a need to respond to that. However, I cannot get my head around the disproportionality and the fact that this has turned from a response into revenge, and the fact that so many civilians have been affected. And doesn't matter, we can use any kind of words to describe what is happening, who was there, who wasn't there. The bottom line is, when the British doctors come back, they talk about children that they operate on with some devastating wounds. They talk about 23,000 killed, 27,000 wounded. They talk about some 20,000 orphaned. They talk about schools and hospitals and homes and streets and shops destroyed. They talk about dialysis machines being deliberately destroyed. There is something deeply wrong with that response. And if on top of that, you also have people who are not starving, they're being starved deliberately. And we don't need to look on whether it is the case or not. I mean, the defense minister of Israel came out and said, these are inhuman animals and they're going to be, there's going to be a city of tents, no water, no electricity, no food, etc. It's there in black and white. My approach is being pro-human, being pro-citizens of occupied territories, as citizens, as human beings, fellow human beings, doesn't mean you're anti-Israel's right to defend itself. But I think we need to remind ourselves, because the passions get so people get so worked out about it that they kind of can't see that everyone is losing. And how it connects to my experiences when I look at some, the people who really suffered in Bosnian war are Bosnian Muslims, because they ended up being locked up and kept in rape prisons and whatever camps. But I don't think that the Bosnian Serbs or Bosnian Croats didn't suffer. I don't think that even Serbia hasn't suffered, because it's been a country that has been stuck for the last 30 years, cannot make a movement in the right direction. So I kind of approach it because I cannot, as we started at the beginning, I can't understand that we cannot relate to another human being. It is wrong, it doesn't matter who does it. Anyone who would do what has been done to people of Gaza is on the wrong side of history. If we, who are friends of Israel, cannot see that, then I think it will take people, I won't say like me, but I will be one of those people, and there are so many others who will try to point out that this is wrong. And we need to not only condemn, we need to take active measures and active steps to address this. Again, I say, not because anyone has got anything against the state of Israel, not because we do not understand that it was a massive blow, not because we don't understand that there is no need to respond. But democracies, they have to respond in a different way. They don't go by erasing an area, by killing children, by indiscriminately bombing. That's not what democracies do, because if that is a new normal, I want to say that we shouldn't be surprised when it happens elsewhere and it happens to us. And I think we have to be really, really careful. And if we want to do it for the sake of humanity, let's do it out of sheer national and self-interest.
Do you feel you're on a lonely journey here?
Potentially, but then there are others, and there are many colleagues when I speak in the House, and I don't even go as far as I would want to sometimes. They will come and stop me in the corridor and say, well done for speaking. And I don't like that, because if you can't speak in this place, where on this planet can you speak openly? And if we cannot have an open debate about this issue, there are so many other issues that will come and line behind, and we are not going to be able to talk about. At which point, we all live in silence, and resentment starts to build up. And that is what happens in societies that have no freedom of speech and where you do not feel safe to talk about certain issues. And I think if any country, and I have idealized this country and everything it stands for, and I continue to, and if in this house we cannot be open and speak about it openly and respectfully, taking into account that other people will have different point of view, but have a proper and healthy and good argument, I don't think that we are able to do it anywhere else.
You are a member of the International Relations Committee from 2016 to 2021, and I've always been impressed by their reports, because I do think that the House of Lords on occasions like that speaks with a strong voice. For example, on Afghanistan and the consequences of Afghanistan, I think you predicted 6-9 months ahead what would happen, and saw a different path on that. So the work of that was admirable. What was your experience in the International Relations Committee?
I loved it. I want to go back as soon as they will have me back. I loved it because there's one thing about House of Lords that people don't recognize, and that it has deep they're people who have knowledge and experience and passion for subjects, and dare I say they have time as well, because their life of a member of parliament is different to the life of a member of the House of Lords. You don't have a responsibility towards constituency, therefore you don't have to, pack your stuff and go to the constituency on Thursday and come back on Monday. You have much more time to read, to debate, to study, etc.
To scrutinise legislation.
That's true, but it's scrutinised legislation, which is...
House of Commons is not too good at that now.
They're not good at that, and I can tell you my experience when we were during pre-Brexit and post-Brexit era. I remember people just getting up at 2 o'clock in the morning to debate a phrase, and I was just sitting there like, is it really that important? But I had to sit through it, and it is actually important, and that expertise really comes handy when you are changing legislation. And legislation is just not a piece of paper, it's something that is going to affect everyone's life. So I loved being on International Relations Committee. There's knowledge and time that is abundant to kind of explore certain issues. And as I say, it's also very good that it's kind of like so full of different people with different experiences, whether someone who's chief of defense staff that you're sitting next to, and sometimes you think like, should I really ask this question, or is he going to say she's so naive? But it is really nice and encouraging, because maybe former CDS will have brilliant knowledge about strategy and weaponry and how it will be done. But maybe he will have not thought about things that I would have thought of, how it is going to affect women in particular in Afghanistan, how is it affecting those who have worked with our troops, whether as translators, etc., and their families, and maybe we all complement each other. So I loved it. I would love to go back. This is me reapplying. I would love to go back and do it again, and with the witnesses and the support that we get from the staff were just amazing. So it was great.
Okay. What's your argument for the House of Lords? And that maybe some of your friends would say, what are you doing getting into a place that's unelected, that seems remote from people, that doesn't seem to do very much, that doesn't have an imprint on society? What's your answer to that? I have my own answers, but give me your answer.
Well, my answer to my friends when they say that, they're like, look, I'm there, so it's a very good place. No, my answer to that is you need to get to know House of Lords and not to think about it as a club for the privileged. It is a place where people from different walks of life come and have an opportunity to not only debate but scrutinise legislation make sure that the law that is going to govern your life and life of your families and your friends is done in the best possible way to protect not only the interests of your personal interests, but interests of those who you love, and that it's going to make sure that we do the best by the people that we are supposed to work for and serve. And I would also suggest to them that they come and spend time and see how things are done here, because it's not all about red benches and beautiful interior. It really is about people who are dedicated and committed. And just look around. You know, there are people who, we've just had one issue, like we can talk about that I and some of my colleagues will never agree with, and obviously colleagues on my own benches. Mm-hmm. I mean, I sometimes feel like an odd woman out, but it's fine. That it accommodates different views, we have different experiences that we bring, and that we all work not because it is a job. That's the first thing you learn when you come into the House of Lords. That it's not a job. For me, it's a privilege, but it is a way of contributing and giving back to your society. And no, all people do not have that standard way or imaginary way of how they become members of the upper house. Look at my experience, look at the experience of so many other colleagues. They come from different parties, they have different stories to tell. And honestly, even I, sometimes when I don't speak in a debate, I'll come and sit on the steps because I just want to hear what someone who's got good experience in like technology or law or science is going to say about a particular issue. I often find it easier to listen to than to read about it. And if I have time and I'm in the House, I will come and do it, because it's a great place, not only that scrutinizes legislation, but where you can learn from. And why would anyone have anything against a place where you have so much experience accumulated in one place? People who have been through many experiences, who have held high offices, who have held not such big offices, but have worked, they've been activists, and they've contributed. Why wouldn't you want to have that asset as part of your as your government and structure?
Okay, you've won me over.
Thank you.
On that.
You'll stay.
But you introduced a private members bill recently on the close season for hares.
Yes.
To prevent hunting. That's taken us to another level again. So,
why?
I suppose, well, it's not the intensity of foreign affairs and whatever else, but it's an intense debate.
Yes.
I can tell you, I did a private members bill in the 1990s on fox hunting, and I get chased more than the foxes as a result of that. It was intense. So I don't know if this one was as intense, but when you bring up wildlife, it is a real political issue.
Well, I had a really strange experience during COVID. I spent most of the time in the countryside, and a friend of mine, a colleague from, we used to work together, she found a small leveret that was separated from its mother, which she initially decided not to get anywhere near because you shouldn't touch it. But when buzzards and stoats appeared, etc., and it was in danger and she thought it was wounded, she decided to pick it up, etc. And she wrote a book, which is which I'm going to bring you a copy of. It is called Raising Hare. It's become a bestseller, translated in 15 languages. It's really amazing. And I didn't know that during her research, she said to me, do you know that hares can be shot at any time during the year? I was like, what do you mean they can be shot at any time? There's got to be a respite. And she said, no, they can do it. But it's like, even pheasants, and I'm not saying that pheasants are not worthy preservation, even pheasants have a kind of space to recover. And she said, no, this is the case. So I checked it all, and I find out that there is a law going back to the 1800s that governs the fact that hares can actually be shot and sold at any time. So I did a little bit of research, found out that for the last 20 years, different members of parliament tried to introduce this legislation of creating a closed season between February and September. And I spoke to George Eustace, who former MP and a former Secretary of State, and he told me how much work he has done and how much Lord Randall has done. And I said to them, you know what, there's this book coming out, why don't I just do a private member's bill? And they said, well, you do it, but we've tried, it doesn't work, it hasn't worked. And I thought, well, let me do it. And I've got my first reading, as you know, there's no space, there's no parliamentary time, I completely understand that. But in the meantime, we have also launched a petition, which has almost reached 30,000 now, and got an array of people. I've just done some polling, and it's like 86% of people in Britain would support closed season for England and Wales, which already is alive in Scotland. And I decided, there is sometimes you can spend all your life trying to fight against conflict and human stupidity and the fact that we kind of wage wars and don't know how to stop them. And you do that, and it's part of me. It is never going to go. But on the other hand, here at home, there's some other little things that you can do, and maybe this is one of those little things I can do for Britain, because it's such an iconic animal. It is endangered not only because of shooting, but because of predation and agriculture and agricultural practices, modern practices. But if we can introduce this and change this anomaly in law and help hares be able to increase their numbers and be seen throughout England and throughout Wales, where there's some parts of England where you cannot see any hares, I think that would be a really good thing to achieve. And it'd be good for my soul. So it's not all dark and dangerous, but it is, and I hope that I don't get chased, but it is something that is beautiful and that it actually can contribute to healing the nature in England and Wales. And I would love to make it work. And I must say, this is where maybe the Lords are different from the Commons. I've got a really good rapport with Baroness Helic, and it's a pleasure to talk to her, and she has been absolutely brilliant in explaining to me where the issues are, but also how I can help in a gentle way so we maybe get there. And I see that the government has now responded to the petition first 10,000 and say that that is government's intention to do so, but we at the moment don't have a primary legislation, so we need to find out a vehicle to do so. So I've become an ardent reader of all the legislation here, trying to find a little loophole so I can.
Well, just to support you in that, my late father did say to me when I was growing up that keep in mind, John, he says that the small things in life are actually the big things. So, very important.
And they don't need to be miles away.
Exactly.
They're probably in your garden. And an animal as iconic as brown hare to not be protected in Britain. And I completely respect the fact that I live in the city and there are people who know much better how difficult it is to be a farmer these days, etc. But I think that we can upgrade our respect for nature from the 18th century or 19th century to the 21st. It shouldn't hurt.
You have been described by your friends as discreet. And I think you've been very open this morning, and I think it's been a great conversation. But before we go, what are your passions outside politics?
Passions outside politics?
What keeps you getting up in the morning?
Oh, wow, so many things. Well, my family, I travel a lot. I love music. I play the accordion, which is a very strange instrument to play. I have, I'm an okay cook, so, and I don't think I've got restless, never-ending supply of energy, and long may it last. And I think that's what keeps me going. But also what keeps me going is I know, so many times I've tried to walk away from things. I tried to walk away. It's like, okay, I don't need to think about this. Is really depressing. I don't need to think about it. Or it's another conflict. It's another. But I often think, I'm not actually even doing that much. I just have the incredible luck to have a platform to do something that others can't do, they don't have a voice, but I know what the experience is like. And it would be almost a sin to have this place, ability to, you know, apply for private notice question, ability to speak in a debate and not to use that ability. It would be a waste of an opportunity and a privilege. Mm-hmm. And I just can't, I wouldn't be able to live with myself if I just walked away. So.
Right. Lastly, your message to young people. You know, young people feel that they have been ill-served by the present generation in terms of their future on that. What's your message to young people? What hope would you give them to engage in politics and to understand society better?
I'll probably go back to where I started. And when I was growing up, my parents and in my school always used to teach me that I don't only have privileges, I have responsibilities as well. And I don't want to sound harsh, but from however early, it doesn't need to be politics. It can be your classroom, your school, your community, your family. You should think about how best to contribute and how to be of use. No one owes anything to anyone. We owe a younger generation country that is stable, country that is at peace, country that is prosperous. But no one can deliver or do it for everyone. We all have a part to play. And it can be very, very small. It will be very good for one's well-being. But please, can we just think we are all a part of a big team, and we, as a country, we are a big family, and within that family and within that team, everyone has a responsibility and everyone has a role to play. And we should encourage young people not only to feel that they have to be given, but that this is a two-way relationship, that we give and we take. But we should always think of how best can I contribute. And I say it doesn't have to be you don't have to start at some sort of grand level. Even being in a classroom and be kind to your friends and be there to support those who may need support and to share the knowledge or share experiences and is a very good starting point. So I would start there.
So from the manner of your behaviour growing up and the answer to that, I suppose it could be summed up to young people is that keep in mind that the primary rule is to work for the common good.
Absolutely, because if you work for yourself only, you are excluding others and you cannot exist as a cell on your own. You're part of something much bigger. But work for the common good, because, you know, if we live in the world and in the country and in the neighborhood that is good for everybody, we can only have a good life ourselves. But no matter how good our life is, if the life of those around us is not good, is not stable, if they're suffering, there is a disbalance that cannot produce good outcome, and we need to be there to try and level that disbalance and be kind to others the way that he would like to be others to be kind to us and the way we're kind to ourselves.
A lovely note to finish our interview, and Arminka, many thanks for coming along. It's been a fascinating conversation, and it has been a conversation, and I wish you every best wish out with and in the House of Lords, particularly with your private member's bill. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. It's great to talk to you, and as I say, I'm a great admirer of our house, and I think we often don't get a very good and kind comments about this place, but I only wish people would learn more about what we do here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.